Matters, Angelo Carusone. Angelo, good morning to you, man. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, right. It's always a pleasure to have you, sir. Let me just ask you about this, and this is without even knowing whether or not Media Matters did any scientific analysis on this. Um, but I'm sure you have some thoughts about it, and that has to do, of course, with the hagiography of H.W. Bush. And that even overriding or overshadowing what happened, the media's coverage of the Bush funeral and the Bush proceedings, of Bush memorials, over and above full and extensive coverage of North Carolina and Michigan and Wisconsin. What's your take on that and how the media didn't handle that?
They, to the extent that they cover that story in North Carolina, Wisconsin, they covered it extraordinarily poorly.
Yeah.
And they've consistently, and I think one thing to keep in mind is to put a little bit of a focus on the way that they frame it in the headlines when they do cover it, because by and large, most Americans are not reading the stories that they're sharing. They're just looking at the headlines, and that's basically forming their opinion about that topic. So when you have a New York Times headline that characterizes what the Republicans did in Wisconsin as acting defiantly in the face of a switch of power in the governor's mansion, they're framing it like it's a positive thing, as opposed to a complete and total erosion of our democratic institutions and completely anti-democratic behavior. There was very little discussion of it on CNN, and to the extent that there was, it was framed as something that both sides do, except they acknowledged that Democrats haven't done it yet, but assume Democrats will at some point in the future, so let's just both sides this one, and then lament how this is what our politics have come down to. So I think in both situations, when in the little bit of coverage they gave it, what you can find is either extremely poor framing, where they characterize Republicans' actions as defiant, as somehow a positive thing, or alternatively falling down to the both sides thing. And so that's one problem, that it barely did register, and when it did, it was not covered well. And on the other hand, I mean, if you juxtapose that with not just the total saturation of H.W. Bush's funeral, but the way that they chose to frame it, I don't think that they needed to slam him or to do anything that was dishonorable. But I think when somebody dies, especially a public figure like that, you should try to give a holistic perspective on their life, and especially their public service. You definitely shouldn't gloss over things intentionally because you think it undermines a narrative about H.W. And the other thing that I would point out, though, is that we should look at that coverage and use that as the baseline, because when Jimmy Carter eventually passes, everything that H.W. Bush did and that coverage made him, and what he did, made him a saint because he wrote letters, then I imagine that they're going to give Jimmy Carter even more positive coverage, right, because of all that he's done since he's left office. And I would just put that out there because I don't think you're going to see as much fawning and positive coverage of Jimmy Carter's, post-presidency
No,
as he did about H.W.
no, you're not. But honestly, too, I mean, you mentioned that you don't necessarily want to do anything dishonorable, but then these are presidents,
Yep.
Angelo. Angelo, they're not going to be. We ain't got to go to Jimmy Carter. They're not going to be as kind to you and me when we die. It's going to say. I actually I was giving a speech over the weekend, and it just something that came to mind. It ended up being a funny line. Whenever somebody on our side dies, they say, "Well, this is a good person," but there's always a but.
That's right.
Angelo ran Media Matters for
You know,
years,
yeah.
but. And my thing is, Republicans have butts too. We all have butts.
Yep.
So you're right. But as journalists, we're talking about media. You run Media Matters. If a president cannot be scrutinized, I mean, to me, that's just kind of what presidents are for anyway. Even if I was a president, I wouldn't expect somebody to say, "Okay, well, I was just a god, and nothing ever happened." H.W. Bush was the precursor to Donald Trump. We have to be honest. It was Willie Horton that provided the template for the caravan this current election season. Did he not?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, and in particular, think about the consultants involved in that ad. It was Lee Atwater, right? And
Right.
Lee Atwater, who basically was essentially Roger Stone and right there with Roger Stone and Paul Manafort in the 80s. So I think part of the problem though with the coverage is, and I think it would have been a little bit excessively fawning, regardless of whether or not Trump was in office. But I do think it's a demonstration again of just how much Trump has undermined their ability to engage in any news story unless they can do it through the lens of Trump. So a lot of it felt to me that a lot of the coverage was sort of either a passive aggressive dig at Trump, or alternatively a reflection of the fact that the spectrum has moved so far to the right. Right, the bar has gotten so low now for what we would consider to be objectionable behavior that none of those things, to your point, that HW had done as a part of his bio and his legacy, register as even objectionable anymore, because they've taken the scale and moved it.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. 866-99-SIRIUS. Also, a real lack of acknowledgement and coverage of what's been going on with the Mueller investigation. I can tell that just from even some of my Fox watchers who were callers this morning, who are still acting as if there really was no news this week, like that nothing happened in the Mueller investigation. I mean, this is a major week. What happened with Michael Flynn? I don't. It's as if, has Fox really covered that at all, or are they still doing their usual in run around the facts?
Barely discussed it, and to the extent that they did, it's been consistent with their long-term narrative, which is that Sean Hannity says multiple times a day now, don't ever talk to the FBI, essentially to obstruct justice. And what they also are doing is, anytime they do mention the Flynn stuff in particular, they use it as evidence of Mueller entrapping people, and that's their position, that he has been basically trying to trap people, and that's why you're seeing this talk. And where I think, in a weird way, where I think some of the Mueller stuff and then the fawning coverage of HW starts to come together or collide is in the Trump beginning to float the idea of the new AG appointment being somebody who was previously the AG for George H.W. Bush, which you would think, especially after this coverage, that HW would not have a crazy person as his attorney general, right? I mean, he had all this positive coverage. He was a reasonable man. Except the AG that Trump is considering is somebody that's going to that believes the president does not can completely obstruct justice and direct investigations. That thinks that there needs to be a probe into Hillary Clinton, and that believes that there needs to be a probe into Uranium One. All of
you're talking about William Barr. William Barr,
That's
of course.
Right. Yeah, sorry about that. Yep, William Barr.
Matt Schlapp, there's a clip of Media Matters, folks. Matt Schlapp accusing Robert Mueller of blackmailing people into saying things and doing things. Clearly, he knows nothing about the law, because a prosecutor can get people to say and do things by granting them immunity or granting them no jail time. In fact, this morning, folks, we're going to learn more about Manafort and Cohen and see what happens there. But now, too, I have context now from my callers this morning saying that the Michael Cohen, any of this stuff means nothing, because Sean Hannity said it, has been saying it all along, that this stuff means absolutely nothing. Cohen's guilty plea means nothing. None of this matters. And that's the propaganda, the brainwashing and denial that Fox News and the right-wing media is pushing out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why it's something that we should be concerned about and have been for 2 years, right? Which is that what it essentially says is that there's nothing. It doesn't matter what happens with the investigation, even if they have, proof, positive pictures, everything. It makes no difference, because at the end of the day, they've castigated Mueller as having as having the idea that he is in the tank for Democrats has really seeped in, even though there's no evidence of that. And then the separate thing is that none of this actually matters. That they are either being forced or pressured into lying or giving up information to Mueller that isn't necessarily true or accurate to save themselves, because Mueller is blackmailing people or intimidating people. And what they're really doing is they're undermining the rule of law, and they're kind of creating a collision course with our own institutions. They're playing chicken with our institutions, and so at some point, if there actually is any kind of accountability, there will be a crisis, a constitutional crisis, of which we will then. It'll be hard for us to sort of rally around that, right? Because half of the country is going to see the world through the lens of what Fox has created, and that's the part that is I think really scary. I mean, and this is nothing new, to be honest. I mean, a lot of the stuff feels like it's new, but I mean, Republicans have long played chicken with our institutions. I don't think this is really new just because Trump is in office. I just think he's really unleashed it.
Well, I think what is new, though, is there's Fox and there's social media. I heard someone say, I remember who it was earlier in the week, Angelo Carusone with his folks, 27 minutes by the hour, MediaMatters.org, that if Nixon had Fox and or social media, he might not have resigned. What's your reaction to that?
That's a fair point. I think that's totally right. I really do.
Okay.
And I would point out that Fox is going to get worse, a lot worse, because in a few months they are going to be free from any real constraints that are currently holding them back. Right now, they actually have a counterbalance, and that's their entertainment division. And they are one big company, and they have to balance a massive army of celebrities and entertainment relationships. And once that Disney deal goes through, Lachlan Murdoch will move the headquarters of Fox to L.A., where he will be based. And the chief communications officer for that new company will be Poe Hicks, Trump's former communications director. And the head of ad sales, who's really the person that helps with the business side of it, will be the person who was previously the head of ad sales for Fox News, who now run ad sales for all of Fox. And they won't have any constraints. There'll be nothing holding them back. So the focus of the mission of the organization now will essentially be to become even more of a fully realized propaganda operation, because their alignment with Trump is the new business strategy. And that is going to mean that everything that has been bad about Fox News will be worse.
Well, that's scary.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty scary. So what does that mean? What's going on, though? What's the latest on their advertisers, though? I mean, if they can put full attention on that, can they afford to do that with the advertisers they've been losing, Angelo?
And it's funny, they've been accepting, which is unusual. They have been basically accepting both publicly to some extent their statements and definitely privately. They are accepting the idea that they are losing hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising revenue. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. In the past, they would have lied about this. They're not even bothering. And what they're saying is it doesn't really matter. They're making the argument that it doesn't matter because 60% of their revenue comes from these things called subscriber fees, which is what cable companies pay them to provide the service, even if nobody watches it. And so they're sort of reassuring most in the industry that it's not that big of a deal because most of our revenue, a little more than half, comes from these subscriber fees, so we can afford to lose a few $100 million in advertising. That's not true. Actually, I mean, they can't afford to lose that, especially when they become just a Fox entity. In terms of the prognosis there and sort of what this means for accountability, there really is only one path forward, and that's that between now and the beginning of May, which is when they will sell most of their advertisements for 2020 in May of 2019, about a year in advance. And so between now and the beginning of May is really the time, the opportunity to have the most impact on Fox News' long-term revenue on the advertising front, to really take that few $100 million of losses and double it so that we're approaching, more like $500 or $600 million as opposed to $300, which it is right now. And then from there, shareholders have to sue because they're the only ones that have the power right now to force a change at Fox. But they can't sue unless Fox News is breaching their obligations to give them a return on investment. And it has been successful in the past. One of the things about the Glenn Beck campaign, there were, I was working on that. Media Matters was, Color of Change was working on it. One thing that never really makes it out there in terms of what I think helped put it over the top was all of that advertiser work. One thing that took place after a year of losses is that a few shareholders actually sued Fox News. And they sued them for a few reasons, and one of them was the losses on the Glenn Beck show. And it is a breach of obligation, and there is real teeth there. And I think that that's really the strongest path forward, is to create the conditions where a shareholder lawsuit can be powerful. And while that's going on, to then begin a campaign to get cable companies to let people not pay Fox News $1.50, even if they never turn the channel on.
Who else comes even close to that 150? Anybody?
Nobody.
And,
Nothing is even close.
and again, how did they get in early on? How did they pull that off of themselves with that much money?
They are, they basically, they have a stable of programming like National Geographic and FX, which has movies and
Gotcha.
and obviously sports, and they've leveraged it very effectively. But look, other networks have a lot of stuff too. But CNN's only getting 70 cents for every person, a little less than half of Fox News is, and MSNBC gets even a fraction of that. I mean, in some places, MSNBC is getting 17 to 30 cents a person. And whereas Fox is getting $1.50, $1.60. They are amongst the most expensive cable channel outside of the premiums, and the only thing that comes close is USA Networks, which is like $1.70. Fox is pretty consistently the most expensive or the second most expensive channel on cable news.
Wow. 866-99 Sirius, 866-997-4748. About 27 minutes before the hour. Let's do this. You did mention William Barr, and of course another headline at Media Matters is Fox is going to love Trump Attorney General pick William Barr. He's right up their alley. But also they are happy about Heather Nauert. Am I pronouncing her name correctly? I don't know.
Yep. Yeah,
Nauert. She was on Fox News, and now she's about to be UN ambassador. That qualifies her?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't qualify her at all. But she fits the model for Trump, which is somebody that can do well on television. And she was a Fox and Friends host for a while. And that just means that Trump's very familiar with her. And she was a Fox and Friends host at a time when and a Fox News host at a time when Trump was going on the program, every Tuesday. He used to have Trump Tuesdays, and that's a part of it. That he's very familiar with her because of that his own television consumption, and she fits sort of the character role that he's looking for. She does not have any foreign policy experience, she's definitely not qualified for this job, but I don't think that she would be the only person in the administration that lacks the qualifications for the role that they are given.
Right. That kind of is how they run things over there.
Yeah.
Very few people are qualified for what they're supposed
to do. Don't
do.
forget, we got Larry Kudlow, as the as the National Economic Advisor, who's running it. He's just a CNBC person who basically, got a job like this. He's not remotely qualified either. He doesn't really seem to know anything about economics.
Yeah. This is unbelievable. Folks, as always, we're happy to have Angelo Carusone on with us, president of Media Matters. Their year-end fundraiser is coming up as well. And those of you who understand and appreciate and support the ongoing work of Media Matters, we ask you to take part in their year-end fundraiser. That's what we need to do to keep Media Matters alive. Right, Angelo?
That's right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So, folks, go to MediaMatters.org and make a donation. It doesn't have to be a lot. I mean, Media Matters, they will accept your small dollar donations. But we need accountability in media, and we need a medium that examines other media for fairness and accuracy, and no one does that quite the way Media Matters does. And most importantly, they watch Fox and listen to Rush Limbaugh, so you don't have to. So, folks, please, ma'am, please, sir, go to MediaMatters.org, and if you don't mind, participate in their year-end fundraiser. We would definitely appreciate that. Again, Angelo Carusone is the president. As always, buddy, thank you, and
Thank you.
have a great weekend. Okay.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Take care now.
Talk soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care now. Bye bye. 866 Sirius. The jobs report is out. 155,000 jobs. Not as good as expected. Get ready. We might be getting this recession. May very well be getting ready to happen. 866 Sirius. 866 9974748. When we come back, folks, don't go away. Max Bergman of the Moscow Project is going to join us. Sirius XM Progress 127, Resistance Radio. Get woke. Get ready for impeachment. This is MIP.